This video is now in session, and the 2024 Senate election for the Democrats is almost certainly going to be a bloodbath and is going to be a very big fight with the Republican Party. Now, that's a very blunt statement to make when we're still more than three years away from the 2024 elections. But the thing with this election, with the 2024 election, is that Democrats should start worrying right now and start preparing through the 2022 elections by increasing their advantages in the 2022 elections so that they can decrease the blunt of the 2024 election. And the reason why the 2024 election should prove so boring for the Democrats is because for the Senate, I believe Class 3 map is the Class 3 map is going to be up for re-elections. I could be wrong. Let me just quickly check. The Class 1 seats will be up for elections, and there are a total of 34 or 33 of those seats. 33 of those seats are up for re-election, and you can see how much blue there is right here in comparison to the red. So you can see that there are a total of 13 plus 8, 21, plus 3, 24, plus 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. Oh wait, that's 13, 8, 3. So yeah, 21 and 24. There are a total of 24 Democratic Senate seats that are currently present in this map. Meanwhile, for the Republican side, there are only 11 seats in comparison to the Democrats' amount, which is 24. So that's a very big difference between the Republican and the Democratic side. If we look at the other maps, this is the Class 3 map. I'm not quite sure, but this is one of the other maps where it's a lot more even, where Republicans have an edge, but it's not quite a big edge. Here, it's a bigger edge, but again, it's not like this, which is a very big difference. And if we look at the 2016 election, or if we look at this map right here, this is the map that Democrats seriously have to capitalize on for the 2022 election in order to have a chance of actually retaining the Senate in the 2024 election. Because if you see this map right here, you can see that a lot of these Democratic seats are competitive. Montana and West Virginia especially so. You can see Montana and West Virginia, both of them are really Republican states. Meanwhile, for the rest of the competitive seats, you have Nevada, Arizona, potentially New Mexico in a really competitive year, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And you could also technically count New Jersey because of Bob Menendez. But for the Republican side, there are only two competitive seats, which are Florida and Texas. None of the other seats, not even including Missouri or Indiana, are that competitive. Now, the 2018 election, the reason why you see Democrats retaining so many seats from the 2012 election, which is the last time this map was up, is because of the year. It was 2018, a blue wave year, which was really lucky for the Democratic Party because even though the Democrats didn't really have much opportunities to gain seats, at least they weren't losing seats. The only other choice for this map was to either be up for the 2016 election or the 2020 election. Both elections would have been really bad for the Democratic Party, but with the 2018 elections, at least it's not. At least Democrats aren't losing too many seats, even though they did lose North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, and Florida. And that's actually why you see these three states right here shaded as likely, because instead of safe. It's because all three of these seats had Democratic incumbents that were trying to run for re-election but lost by varying amounts. 5.8 here, 5.9 percentage points here, and then here with Heidi Heitkamp losing by 10.8 percentage points. And then finally, Florida, where Bill Nelson, the incumbent senator, lost to Rick Scott by only 0.12 percentage points. But you can see here in this 2018 election, if we apply this to the 2024 election, it's a presidential election year, which gets a lot worse for the Democratic Party because when it comes to presidential election years, usually the Senate seats go the same way as the presidential states. So, for example, let's take North Carolina, for example, in the 2020 election. On the presidential side, it went to the Democratic Party, not the Democratic Party, it went to the Republican Party in the 2020 election. If I can load this up, past elections, and if we see here, Trump won by 1.3 percentage points, and this helped translate over to the Senate race, where you can see Tom Tillis won by 1.7 percentage points against Cal Cunningham. Now, Tom Tillis did benefit from the fact that Cal Cunningham had a Sexton scandal, but he was largely carried by Donald Trump, who won the state of North Carolina. If Donald Trump did not win North Carolina and Joe Biden won instead, we could very well see Cal Cunningham in the U.S. Senate. But because Donald Trump was on the same ticket as Tom Tillis, then Tom Tillis was able to win. So that's how presidential elections and Senate elections usually coordinate with each other if they happen in the same year. So with the 2024 election, and if we look at the Class 1 map that we saw earlier, you can see that Montana was red for the 2020 election. You can see that it went to Trump by 16.4 percentage points. Meanwhile, Testa was only able to win in this race by 3.6 percentage points. Imagine if this was in a presidential race. Jon Testa would need to do a lot of ticket splitting. He would need to convince a lot of people to ticket split in order to win in this election, which is why it's so hard for Democrats to win in rural states in presidential years, and that's why Republicans can't win in urban states in presidential years. It's because of the fact that there's a presidential election going on at the same time. It would be so much harder for a person like Sherrod Brown to counteract Trump's momentum in the presidential election if Sherrod Brown was going to go up in the same ticket as Donald Trump. If we look at the 2020 election, Donald Trump won this state by around 8 percentage points, 8.1 percentage points. So that's a big ticket split-in amount that Sherrod Brown would have to do in order to counteract the Republicans' campaign by Donald Trump. The same thing in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All three of these seats went to Democrats by large amounts, but this was in a blue wave year. Now imagine if this happened in a presidential election year. All three of these seats would be much more competitive compared to the 2018 election, which is why it's so bad for Democrats, because they need every seat possible in order to retain the Senate majority. If we look at the 2022 election, at this moment, they're only rated to gain one seat. Meanwhile, for the 2018 election, they could very well lose West Virginia. They could lose Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Montana, even Arizona. If we look at all of these competitive seats and compare them to the Republican competitive seats, if you traded all those seats and if all of those seats flipped from one party, from the incumbent party to the other, the Republicans would have a very big majority in the United States Senate. Let's just entertain this example. So assuming that Democrats end up with 51 seats by the end of the 2022 election by gain in Pennsylvania, if we look at the 2016 election, if this seat flips to the Democratic side because of John Fetterman, let's go over to the 2022 election now. So, with this, we have 24 seats again for the Democratic side. Meanwhile, we have 11 seats. 11 seats for the Republican side, and there were two special elections that occurred, one for the Democratic Party, the other for the Republican Party. So we can subtract one from each side. So that's 23 seats for the Democratic Party and 10 seats for the Republican Party. Now, imagine how this flip would go. So Democrats would have 51 seats. And then meanwhile Republicans have 49. So 49 plus Pennsylvania 50. Let's give the benefit to the doubt to Bob Casey, because Bob Casey is pretty popular in his state. So 49. Joe Manchin his seat is almost definitely going to flip over to the Republican Party. Manchin was actually supposed to win by a larger margin than he won in the 2018 election. He was supposed to win by a majority of the vote rather than a plurality of the vote by polling standards and by forecasting. So his seat is almost definitely going to go to the Republican Party. So that's 49 plus 1, that's 50. And then Sherrod Brown, he is a populist, so we will let him off loose. This is the most liberal estimates possible. Debbie Stabenow would be she would be in a very tough position. Tammy Baldwin also in a tough position. So 50 plus 1, that's 51, 52, and then Amy Klobuchar is pretty popular with her state, so she would most likely be able to get away in a presidential election. And then John Tester, almost definitely, unless if he pulls off some kind of magic trick, his seat would also flip to the Republican Party, so that would be 53 seats. And then Florida would stay the status quo, Texas would stay the status quo, Arizona could potentially flip to the Republican Party, that's 54 seats, especially with Kyrsten Sinema not being that popular with both Democrats and Republicans, with both sides of the spectrum. And then if you add up Bob Casey and as well as Sherrod Brown, that's 56 seats for the Republican Party. And then assuming Bob Menendez runs for re-election, his seat could also be at jeopardy in a presidential year because of his scandals. But let's just let him off the loose. Nonetheless, that would put Republicans at a majority of 56 seats, which is a lot of... which is a big gain from 49, which would be the projected amount that Republicans would have between 2023 and 2025. So with that, they're only 4 away from a filibuster-proof majority. And with that, they could definitely block a lot of what Democrats want to do, because now Democrats need 16 Republican senators in order to get stuff done. Yeah, getting 16 Republican senators, getting 16 senators of the opposite party these days is impossible. So it's very unlikely that we'll see. It's very unlikely that we'll see anything get done in the 119th Congress in the 2024 election. So if Democrats want to get stuff done between 2024 and 2026, then they have to do a lot for the 2022 election. They have to retain all of their seats, including Arizona and Georgia, so that would be 50 seats in total. And then they would have to flip Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, that's 52 seats. And then they would have to flip potentially North Carolina, 53 seats, Florida, 54 seats, and then if they want some extra coverage, Ohio with 55 seats, and if they want to go even further than that, Missouri with 56 seats. But that's the most liberal estimates. Now let's tie that over to the 2018 election, where they start off with 56 seats. From the last demonstration we did, Republicans gained from 49 seats to 56 seats. So that means that Republicans gained 7 seats. So if we subtract 7 from the Democrats' supposed majority after 2022 in the most liberal circumstances of 56 seats, so 56 seats to minus 7, that's 49 seats. Republicans would still end up in the majority after the 2024 election in the Senate, because of how Democratic skewing this map is and how competitive a lot of these seats are, especially for the Democratic side. So with that, Democrats are in a very bad situation come 2024. Obviously, the Senate favors Republicans because the Senate favors rural states, and Republicans are more likely to inhabit rural states. But the thing is, Democrats, it's regardless of that fact, Democrats just simply need to be very competitive in the 2024 election in order to have a chance of retaining the Senate. They have to do pretty well in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and then they have to not lose by a ridiculous margin, as ridiculous of a margin as 2020 in Ohio. And then if they want to have if they want to win the West Virginia election, they have to convince Joe Manchin to run for re-election, which is going to be a hard task. And then the other thing is they have to, they just have to hope that the Republican side doesn't get a good candidate, because the 2018 election, Joe Manchin was able to win partly because the Republican opposition was not a good candidate. If Jim Justice were to run for the 2024 election as a Republican, then we could very well easily see Joe Manchin lose the 2024 election if he does decide to run for re-election. So that's going to be a hard challenge for the Democratic Party. And then in Montana, you have Jon Tester, who is pretty popular with Montanans, but the problem is that in a presidential election year, Jon Tester would fare the worst of any of these candidates besides Joe Manchin because of how Republican Montana as a state is. He was able to win because of the 2006 election, and he only won by a tilt margin, by the way, but he was able to win because Conrad Burns, which I believe is his name, was not really that popular with Montanans at that time. He suffered from a lot of scandals, and 2006 was a blue wave year, which meant that Jon Tester was able to win by a tilt margin. And then go over to the 2012 election, he won by 3.7%, and then the 2018 election, he won by 3.6%. So it's been pretty stagnant, but in the 2012 election, Obama was, that presidential year was a lot less partisan and a lot less divisive than 2016 and 2020 combined, or I guess 2016 and 2020 individually speaking. So it's going to be much harder for Tester to win. It's going to be much harder for Democrats to win, which is why this video is being made, because the only way Democrats can counteract it is through the 2022 elections. It's the only by gaining seats in Republican states, including North Carolina and Florida, which this seat, by the way, would be pretty hard for Democrats to gain because Marco Rubio is able to attract a lot of the Cuban American base. But nonetheless, the Democrats will have to do as much as they can for the 2022 election in order to have a slight chance of retaining the Senate majority in 2024. So with that, we could very well see after the 2024 elections, if Democrats Republicans are able to upset the Democrats like they were in the 2020 election, then we could very well see Joe Biden continue as president, but the Congress being entirely Republican, because Democrats were not able to make gains in North Carolina in the 2020 election. They were not able to flip Maine. They were not able to flip Iowa, Texas, and some of the more Republican states in the 2020 election. So the 2024 election will prove to be a disaster for the Democratic Party if they don't build up precautions before then. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.